Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to have back on the show Law Professor Jennifer Taub. She's a professor at Western New England University School of Law, author of the book Big Dirty Money. She also is a host of the podcast Booked Up with Jen Taub, and her Substack newsletter is Money and Gossip. Sign up for it there. Professor Taub, how are you, my friend?
I am amazing, Dean. How are you?
You survived the eclipse. Everything went fine. You didn't stare into the sun.
I did stare into the sun, but I had the appropriate ISO glasses that we got at the last minute from our next door neighbor, and it was just thrilling. I've always been afraid of the sun when I
Sure.
was a little kid. I not just looking at it, but like I thought it was this ominous presence because my father had been watching some kind of Nova show, and on it, they talked about the sun blowing up. And I was freaked out. I was like
Wow.
three. And my father said, "Oh, don't worry. That will happen millions of years from now after you're dead." I'm like, dead?
After you're already
What
dead and
is,
buried, it's like, wow,
I'm
that's
like,
what I'm
but
like.
I didn't even know about death until that moment. So it was a big menacing globe in the sky. And I was so glad to not be afraid of the sun, to be welcoming. It was a gorgeous day. Not to get too, like existential Barbie on you, but yeah, so it felt glorious to be part of something that everyone around the globe, in theory, or at least everyone in the line of
Here in
sight,
North
could
America.
enjoy, not political, not, social, something that we could just love on its own as a communal thing, which we need more of, I think.
Yeah, there were people standing outside of Trader Joe's. I'm like, stop blocking the door. Get away from the door of Trader Joe. They were outside of Trader Joe staring up because from where sitting there, that was so I went out there and looked, and it had become cloudy here. So
Oh,
what can you do? In any event, but we have other things going on also in the same direction as where the eclipse is, where Donald Trump's trial is going to start on Monday, right downtown, not far from me. I'm going to go visit. I'm going to call Mary Trump and tell him I'm coming over. But so Donald Trump is trying all he can to delay this. And he was shot down 2 days in a row. Today we knew that wasn't going to happen. Today he's trying to get the trial delayed so they can hear his gag order appeal, which is meaningless. They were never going to delay the
right.
trial for that. And yesterday it was the idea of the publicity is unfair and we can't find 12 people in the entire borough of Manhattan who will be fair. And I was like, laughed at it, but the court said no. Can you think of anything else he could try to do, or do any predictions what he might try to do? Because he really wants to put this off as much as possible for, I don't know if you get this beyond election day, but it could end up case blocking. We'll come up with a new term now, case blocking the January 6th case if the Supreme Court were to rule quickly on that case, which is going to be argued in 2 weeks. And then this can block that from happening because I think he's more afraid of the federal case. But what do you think? Any other ways to delay this?
So, within the bounds of the law or outside the bounds of the
Anything.
law?
Trump is a dangerous man. I mean, there's no limit, you know.
So, inside the bounds of the law, I know with the first E. Jean Carroll trial that happened, they tried to delay at one point, one part of it claiming, well, his expert witness was ill and couldn't come. So, to me, I know we're not in the height of COVID, but it would strike me that he might try something, having his legal counsel, somehow all of them get a virus or in other words, I can't to the extent that he wants this trial not to happen or not to begin, to buy himself another day. I think he'll do everything and anything, to throw sand in the gears in this case. In terms of legal strategies, you see, he's slammed down by the appellate court now, but maybe he'll go ahead and try to appeal that decision. I mean, remember when he was trying to challenge the legitimate outcome of the 2020 election, there was all kinds of crazy making, like trying to get the U.S. Supreme Court to take the case. In here, there was a ruling by Judge Mershon saying, hey, because Donald Trump tried to raise the immunity
Mhm.
argument at the 11th hour, and the judge said, no, you had plenty of time to raise that. It strikes me that his lawyers would try to go up to the U.S. Supreme Court now and say, this is tied to it because some of the activity that transpired here transpired during the period when he was president. And although we know that that it doesn't appear as if any of it was an official act to the extent the Supreme Court is going to cabin those off, there's a possibility that he will at least ask them. I don't know that would delay. I guess the point I would make is I don't think that would put a stay in place, though, because the court could just decide that later. The question is he going to ask the court for a stay to bundle this together? And I don't know why he wouldn't ask.
Right.
I mean, it's not like
it depends if it. Is there a jurisdiction from a state judge's decision, a trial judge's decision, to go directly to the Supreme Court? I mean, you go to the they went to the appellate division. They didn't go to the Court of Appeals yet. So they haven't exhausted all the appeal process within our own state here of New York.
Right. I'd say, well, he could do that and try to, in other words, he could try to go to this, what is the
Court of Appeals in here?
Yeah, because you start with the Supreme Court, and then you go the intermediate court, and then the appellate court. Right. So he could go to the state court of appeals quickly, expedite it, and try to get up to the Supreme Court. I don't think it's going to help him. I don't necessarily think they take the case, but it seems to me like he would try absolutely anything here, right?
Sure.
And in terms of like safety issues, I really hope that everyone in that courthouse, and the judge in particular, has tons of security.
Me too. So what do you think? Like, if we game this out, like we understand he's trying to get the trials beyond election day, even though the New York State...
let me go back and say what's other thing. Even about because your listeners might, I started to cut you off. We were talking about the procedural piece, but is there even jurisdiction? He's arguing a U.S. constitutional claim of immunity that could trump the state law things, and so that would be a separate question. But go ahead.
Yeah, but I wonder if I have never done U.S. Supreme Court practice, so I'm not sure. Do you have to go through all the state appellate processes first and exhaust those remedies before you can turn to the U.S. Supreme Court to even ask for it? Could he get one Supreme Court justice? I don't know who the one is assigned for this area, but to say, okay, we're going to stay the case, I think unlikely. And it's a state case. It's really a small case in that it's 30 plus felonies, but it's a document case. It's about, fraud in dealing with documents and falsifying ledgers and invoices and stuff. So I don't know why Supreme Court would even get involved in it. But so what do you think? Look, I understand with the federal cases, he's trying to put it beyond the election day. With this one, we're so far out from election day here. I was kind of joking about this idea of case blocking, but the only thing I can play out is that he wants this to go away too, but I don't think it is. So is their fallback, try to use this to block any chance of the January 6th case? If the Supreme Court were to rule kind of quickly, and then Judge Chutkan goes, okay, we're giving you a new trial in September. And he goes, oh no, my state case was moved all the way back to August, and that's going to be going on. And then the result is that case is after the election. I just don't know.
I mean, you're thinking about, I can't imagine that this New York State case could be postponed that long, right? It would take a stay to be put in place as he tries to appeal these various decisions, right? So you're right. I mean, all of this is a strategy to delay, hoping it would bump up against anything else, and then eventually it would go away. I don't think it's going to happen. You did ask a question about who is the U.S. Supreme Court justice who oversees the D.C. Circuit, and that is John Roberts.
Well, the New York, we're in the second. We're in the second.
Oh, shoot! We're in the Second Circuit. I'm thinking of the D.C. Circuit case.
Yeah,
right. I don't know who the Second Circuit, but I can tell you in a second.
I hope it's Sotomayor or Kagan or KG Ketanji Brown Jackson. I hope it's KBJ.
Okay.
So, what about any idea of how they can slow down jury selection? I mean, even there, what are you doing? What are you buying? A few weeks, maybe a month? I mean, I wonder if they're going to do that even more, or they just...
I think this case is going to start on Monday. Well, I shouldn't say start. I think they're going to try to seat I think they're going to get involved in jury selection on Monday. And it could take, I think the judges indicated it's not going to be as fast as it happened in Judge Kaplan's courtroom, where it's like over in a day and you're ready to roll.
That was remarkable. Like, you were there. I wanted to ask you that, because you are friends with
for the first
Carroll.
Case. Yeah.
You were there. It's a similar jury pool. It's a little broader. In fact, they go further out than just Manhattan, but they were able to find a jury that was unbiased, that who knows Donald Trump is, and they sat it so quickly. How did that happen? And I know this one's his liberty's at risk, so it's maybe a higher standard a little bit, but how did that happen so quickly?
Well, I guess two things that happened. One, you say that they were unbiased, but they said, who knows if they were. I mean, he sat the prospective jurors in the courtroom, and they never had to fill it up more than once. All the jurors had a number as opposed to a name associated with them at that time. And the judge conducted the voir dire. In other words, it was not which is, can be normal. Sometimes, of course, the lawyers would rather conduct the voir dire. I mean, the questioning of them. But it was basically like they sat the jurors, and you remember that I think you only need 9 jurors in New York federal court. I think they sat more than that. I'm trying to remember how many jurors there were there. But at any rate, they filled the box with their 12 jurors, and they would do things like to make it go faster. He asked everything of the whole courtroom, not me, but all the other. So instead of like sitting everyone there and just asking the 12, they said, anyone here in the jury box and waiting, has ever worked with any of, they ruled that, has anyone ever worked for, Donald Trump or E. Jean Carroll, whatever. And then, things like that. What newspapers do you read? Have you ever done? And there was this one guy who was not in the jury box, but who was out in the audience. And he was so gunning to be on this jury. And he's like, yeah, I know him, but I'd be totally unbiased. It was like, and then, there was this other guy who was like a retired accountant. You could just tell how excited he was to be on it. And those guys got like, boom, out. If you want to be seated in a jury, you should not draw attention to yourself in those ways. But yeah, the questions were similar to the questions you've seen the judge say they're going to ask. Where do you get your news from? Where do you, if you voted, they're not going to ask you who you voted for, but do you know who this person is? Is there anything that you know about, the lawyer or the parties to this case that would make you unable to, be unbiased? So you don't know what's going on in someone's mind, and the lawyers only get, there are for cause dismissals. Like if the judge could just kick you out, or the lawyers can say, hey, that person said they were biased. Right. And then there's these peremptory challenges, and you only get a handful of those. That's just I just don't like the cut of his jib kind of thing. Or that guy seems like, QAnon based on what they said. But you only get a few of those. And then you seat the jury, and you just, there were a few people on that jury who I was like, uh-oh.
Really? You were concerned about them, ended up going the right way. Right. Yep. I mean, so
you just don't know. And you can watch how the jurors look at the lawyers, or look at you really want the plaintiff and defendant in the room in a civil trial. And obviously you want the prosecutors and the defendant ideally in the room, because you want to see how they relate. Obviously Trump's lawyers are going to want people who smile at him. And, you don't just need a jury.
If I was in the jury pool, I would be smiling at Trump the whole way. I'd be like, oh, there's my beloved Trump. Please pick me for this jury. I promise to be very, very fair.
Yeah, they would know your game. But that's, there is, the jury consultants get paid what they get paid for the reason they do. There's body language. There's a lot. There's a lot going on.
I imagine this week they're probably doing some mock trial stuff, some preparation. I'm talking about Trump's team and maybe the prosecutions. I'm not sure what they do, but I imagine on the defense team, they're preparing Trump, if he's going to testify or not, but preparing for cross-examination of people like Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels and others that they know about, and their witnesses they're going to call. It's a grueling.
They have the jury list.
Yeah.
Right. They have a list of the jurors, and they're going to be going through trying to do research. I mean, this is what you do.
I'm chatting with Professor Jen Taub. So let's talk about the January 6th immunity case. We're still waiting. April 25th is the oral argument in the Supreme Court. It's going to be a pretty important Supreme Court oral argument. And Jack Smith's team filed a motion yesterday saying the Constitution does not give a president the power to conspire to defraud the United States in the certification of presidential election results, obstruct the proceedings for doing so, or deprive voters of the effect of their votes. And it's very interesting that when I was reading more today about it, baked into the Trump's team was this kind of fallback. Like, okay, if you're not going to give us complete immunity, at least send us back to the trial judge to have a hearing about what's an official act versus a personal act. And Jack Smith's team really countered that. And that's the biggest concern for anyone who wants to see this trial actually happen. The Supreme Court doesn't do this cleanly. And they go, you know what? There's no absolute immunity. They're never going to embrace that. But there's some immunity. And depending on like the circumstances, official act, whatever it might be. And we need Judge Chutkan to hold a hearing on that. And that just pushes on for months and months. And that's a win for Trump too. Are you concerned about that, or you think it'll be a cleaner decision whenever we might get it?
Yeah, so I'm concerned about that because I think where Jack Smith would want things to be, or where, let me put Jack Smith aside, where I and you would want things to be, I think, is that it would be not delayed.
Right.
But also, the big picture, I think we understand that the official acts of a president need some protection.
Sure.
So the question is it a matter of law that a judge can decide, meaning the Supreme Court can say this, or is it a matter of fact that that judges and juries would need to decide? Right now, that's a bigger question. There also may be, what is it called? Like, how there could be per se, like this kind of thing is absolutely, within, and this kind of thing is absolutely without as a matter of law. Will be very helpful would be for the Supreme Court to say, we don't know where the line is always drawn, but in this case, as based on, the allegations here, this is a clear case where what we're talking about is outside of an official act. As a matter of law, we're deciding that. Boom, that'd be helpful. But if they send it back down for the court to make that decision, you're right, because then she's going to make the decision, and then it could go up again on review. It would be helpful for the Supreme Court to say, based on what if these are the facts, this is the ruling, and they could but again, delay. This is not, U.S. v. Nixon. I mean, U.S. v. Nixon, the case was heard on July 8th, 1974, and the court came down with their decision 16 days later, like on the 24th. It was heard on a Monday, and then 2 weeks later, like on the Wednesday, they decided. But it also wasn't a lengthy decision, and they also didn't have a lengthy decision from the court below. So on top of having to hear these arguments, even if the Supreme Court is going to decide against Donald Trump, they may hate the district court, the D.C. Circuit's reasoning. So the clerks have to go and read that. So, I mean, even if this case, when it's heard on the 25th is when the 25th of April, I mean, they're not going to be able to. I'd be surprised if they're going to come out with a decision in May, right? I think it's going to take them till June. So, that case, God knows when that's gonna be decided.
Yeah, and Jack Smith in his pleadings and his brief that they filed, they said that the specific form of criminal conduct here does not justify any form of immunity, and they're arguing that even if a president is entitled to certain protections, these are private acts. And look, this Supreme Court can go look at Article 2 of the Constitution, which lays out the obligations, responsibilities of the president, and say, hey, here's the allegation, the indictment, and everything alleged is outside of the scope of Article 2. So this is not an issue. You're right. Or it could be, they could give an opinion that's less of a trial judge actually making determination and saying it's a question for the jury. And the trial could happen, but the jury has to be told perhaps, one of the things you have to find, was this a private act or was this an official act? And if it is, then you stop your deliberations there and the person's immune. I mean, it's everything.
Remember, what's tricky, why it feels like more like a matter of law than a matter of fact, is we had the same issue in terms of the E. Jean Carroll case. Remember, because if it was an official act, then it would be handled. This is why the Justice Department dropped out of the case finally. When he was defaming her, when he was defaming, I remember this whole thing when he was defaming her. There was this question of whether he would be he would have been a government official at the time of the defamation, right? And so therefore, he would somehow be protected. And then because the way it would have been taken over by the Department of Justice and then dismissed because defamation wouldn't have been covered, he would have the immunity. And that got decided as a matter of law. That was not right. I mean, that went all the way up, and it was decided by Judge Kaplan, and then kept going through the court system. So there's no reason why the court couldn't figure out a narrow way to decide this particular case and say, like you said, yeah. But he's got a lot of justices he put on that court. So
I know if this is argued April 25th, and we get the decision could come at the end of the term, at the end of June. And unless it's like, okay, go try him. If it's go try him, well, Judge Chutkin said he's still going to get essentially about 3 months to prepare, even though all this time he could be preparing. And that the decision comes out at the end of June. We're talking about July, August, the end of September, an October trial date. It doesn't get completed before the election. And at that point, even Judge Chutkin, who's no Trump fan, she's a fan of justice, might say in these unique circumstances, we're going to start the trial after the election. And that would be kind of remarkable. Because then
Can I circle?
here's the bizarre thing. What would happen if they start the trial? Say bizarre, worst case scenario, Donald Trump actually wins. Judge says November 10th is a trial date. She says it happens. He's convicted. Like, he can't stop it. Like, say it's a 4-week, 5-week trial. He's convicted before he's sworn in at the end of December.
Which case are we talking about? Are we talking about the federal case?
The federal case.
Okay, yeah.
Then he's got to test if he can pardon himself. And if he's not, he's then going to be sworn in as a convicted felon who's not going to have to serve jail time, I imagine, until after you leave office, which means he's never leaving office, which I don't think he's leaving office. If he wins, he's not leaving office anyway. I think we all get that. But it's forget it. You know, we're just playing it. So the last thing here, the last couple of minutes, I want to talk about the abortion thing. Donald Trump did his abortion infomercial yesterday. You know, it was kind of like act now and you get one abortion free. And it was kind of this bizarre thing where he said nothing. But the media interpreted as like he came out against a national abortion ban, which he didn't. He didn't do that at all. He said the state should decide. He didn't say I'm against a national abortion ban. But then we have, like in Arizona today, the Supreme Court says we're bringing back to life a law from the 1800s, from 1864, in the middle of the Civil War. I think little and little, this drip on abortion is going to define this campaign. I mean, it doesn't matter what we're talking about now. I think we get to the fall. This might be the big issue, unless something else comes up we don't know about. This and preserving democracy. What do you think?
Oh my gosh. So the thing is, I don't believe anything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. This is a man, speaking of E.G. and Carroll, who lies about his lies, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, he couldn't keep his mouth shut, so he ends up with this, not just one case, but a second case, even though it was for the first defamation, where it was so much more money, because he can't, unless you require him to pay, close to $100 million. The guy had to pay $83 million, not including interest, because he makes up lies. And on top of it, even after losing that, he lies about that. Right. So this guy, I heard Nancy Pelosi on Morning Joe today. What he believes, who knows? The only thing he believes in is himself. And he will say anything that's politically expedient. And he's trying to have it both ways. But we all know that he'll do anything to stay in power. And he's only saying, I'm going to leave it to the states, as if that is the progressive position. He's only saying that because he thinks that's kind of right down the middle. But no one's happy with that. But what he's going to do, I guarantee you, is say to people in private, I'm just saying that. I really am going to support an abortion ban. He'll say that. Period. And this is so incredibly dangerous. And I do think you make a really good point, which is leaving it to the states means that women who have a miscarriage, women who have an abortion by choice, will be in prison. This is not a good thing. Their health is at risk. We already know that. Politically speaking, I think they're going big or going home. I think this is the right wing of the Republican Party figure, let's take a shot at this, because they figure they could really get this done. It's going to turn out voters, I hope, all over the country who don't want their freedom taken away.
Yes, I agree. And there is zero doubt any of us have that's listening. If Republicans got control of the House and the Senate and Trump is president, they will pass an abortion ban and Donald Trump will sign it. Whatever that is, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 10 weeks, 0 day, day one of the conception, whatever it is, he will 100% absolutely sign it. I don't care if there's rape exception or not. He still will sign it, because whatever his base wants, he will do. And then in return, they will storm the Capitol for him or whatever else he needs. It's kind of remarkable, isn't it, my friend? So,
it's totally remarkable. I got one little quick thing. It is, you were 100% right. It's Sotomayor, Second Circuit.
Oh, that's so good. She's going way back. She's not going to, I hope she doesn't try to be fair, because there's no basis. Like yesterday when they were having the appellate division argument, I'm like, there is zero basis to delay the trial because of pre-trial publicity, and you can appeal from juror. If you can't find 12 jurors or their bias, you can do some other appeal later, but you're not going to stop this now. Well, Jen, thanks so much for being on. And if people, the newsletter again, Money and Gossip, they go to Substack, they can read it there. And your podcast, Booked Up with Jen Taub, is everywhere, right? That typical thing.
Well, I shelved it in January, but all the old episodes are there for you to listen to.
Check it out. Thanks, Jen. Thanks so much for being on. I appreciate it. Have a great day.